So, how you doing, everybody? So, I wanna talk about Chris Johnson, the retired NFL player. He was one of the fastest running backs in NFL history. He was known for his speed. Right, played mostly for the Tennessee Titans. So he came out recently on Good Morning America, and he said that he has ALS. Okay, ALS. I want to talk briefly about ALS real quick, and to see if the football caused ALS. Right? So ALS stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, right? Or is known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Lou Gehrig is a famous baseball player in the past that also had ALS, and you can say he made it more known to the world, ALS. So what is ALS exactly? So if you break down, we have two types of when it comes to neurology, we have two types of nervous system. We have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system basically includes the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and spinal cord. This is what you consider the central nervous system. Central. The peripheral nervous system, goes out to your extremities and stuff. But for argument, so what happens in ALS? First, I want to say only about 10% of people with ALS comes from genetics. You know, only 10%. The rest of the 90% of ALS cases, we don't know, or Western medicine doesn't know exactly why it happens, right? So research is still being done. So what happens is that ALS happens when you have the destruction of the upper and lower motor neurons, more motor neurons. When it comes to neurons, we have sensory neurons where we can sense the touch or stuff like that, and they have the motor neurons which they will function. And if you look at the brain here, right? This is a very bad drawing of the brain, but the brain here, you could say this part, the front end of the brain is considered the um the motor neuron area. Okay, the back is considered the sensory. For instance, our occipital lobe is right here to the back of the head. That's where we interpret vision. So with ALS, what happens is that the upper motor neuron, which is the main branch that goes off from the brain, and also the lower motor neuron, okay, the one that goes out and gives instructions, these these tend to start dying basically. Okay, these neurons are just dying. At first, it can start as weakness or maybe tingling a little bit. And in Chris Johnson's case, unfortunately, he was diagnosed last year, and in a year, his condition progressed to the point that he loses, the ability to speak. So what's interesting about this condition is that in ALS, your brain is okay. You can still think, it doesn't affect your brain at all. So it's just that it affects your body, ability to move. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases of that, eventually the nerves that control your diaphragm, a diaphragm helps mammals breathe, okay? So it can expand uh, depending on if you're taking an air or not. A diaphragm plays a vital role. So if you have the lungs right here, our lungs, okay, diaphragms right here. So then it can, you know, depending if you're taking the air or not, diaphragm basically expands and expands. It expands and then relaxes. So eventually in ALS patients, the diaphragm sometimes stops getting signals and it's unable to do its job. And a patient can die from respiratory failure or just basically the inability to actually take a breath or breathe. Also, the ALS patients can use what we call the bulbar reflex, so it can lose the ability to swallow, to speak, and this is one of the worst conditions to have. I'm not gonna lie. Now, of course, I got to bring the acupuncture point of view. Now, there's a question out there to ask. There's a question that's asking, did football contribute to Chris Johnson's ALS? I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I know the answers because I don't know the answers. But I just heard recently on a YouTube video that because of the big lawsuit that happened many years ago with former NFL players for the concussion protocol and stuff like that. So what I was told is that NFL players basically can get treatment done if they think they have a condition that was due to football. And apparently ALS is number one condition on the list. Now it's probably number one because it starts with A, but the point I'm saying is ALS is on that list, which is interesting. I did not know that until yesterday. That ALS is on the football list of conditions that can occur from playing football. Because 90% of cases with ALS, we don't know how it happens. One can argue that maybe one can argue in Chris Johnson case, maybe it is from football. We just don't know. I'm not gonna say it. I don't know. Now, acupuncture can also help with ALS victims now. So I'm gonna be very clear. There's no cure for ALS. There's absolutely no cure. What we can do with acupuncture is that we can help support the symptoms that comes with ALS, digestive issues. Well, ironically, so with ALS patients, the bowel movements are still okay. And even for males, they can get an erection just fine. So that part is working. The bowel movements are okay. They can still get an erection and stuff like that. It's just that the motor neurons eventually becomes decayed, slowly. And but with acupuncture, again, we can provide support. We can, if they have stomach issues or have trouble digesting foods, we can help them with that. I use a system called the AccuGraph Digital Meridian System, where it can show us in graph form which channels are deficient or excess. So if I had an ALS patient, I would tell him or her that ALS is more prevalent in men than women. I would tell them that, hey, even though there's no cure for ALS, acupuncture can help you with the symptoms of ALS. Just the digestive issues, fatigue, and stuff like that. So again, just like most conditions and diseases, if caught early, you know, there could be a little hope as far as to slowing down the progression of ALS. Now, Chris Johnson is 40 years old. Stephen Hawking was a famous physicist. He was diagnosed. He was diagnosed with ALS, I believe, at age 21 or so. And the younger you diagnosed with ALS, you could say the better the outcome. Better meaning that Stephen Hawking lived for like 40 plus years, I believe, after his initial diagnosis, around 40 years, which is tremendous. And part of the reason was that because he was young, also that it never affected his diaphragm. So he was able to, breathe just fine for the most part. And which is amazing. Chris Johnson is 40 years old. Now, the ages people usually get ALS, if they're going to get it, is like after 50 years old. Okay, so Chris Johnson, or 55, I believe. Chris Johnson is still considered young to have ALS. Okay, not as young as 21 years old, obviously, but still considered young. That could work for his advantage, right? So I hope he has acupuncture. So he said that unfortunately his doctor told him to start getting his stuff in order, as if basically he's not gonna be on Earth anymore. But him and his wife refused to take that prognosis or take that feature. So I believe, contacted, I forgot her name, one of the leading neuroscientists, the doctors, about ALS, and he's gonna try some experimental, I think, procedures or drugs. I hope it works for him. I'll also recommend Chris Johnson to try acupuncture. He lives in Florida, I believe, in Orlando. I practice in Miami, Florida. I would love to get a hold of him just to see if he has an acupuncturist who specializes in neurodegenerative conditions. And if he doesn't, I would like to see if I can be of assistance to him to help at least with the acupuncture treatment. Again, there's no cure for acupuncture cannot cure ALS. So let's get that out of the way. I'm not saying that at all. But again, just like my previous videos about CTE and the microglia cells and the T regulatory cells, T regulatory cells also plays a role in ALS. Okay, I mentioned it before on my other video. The T regulatory cells, okay, TREGs for short. These cells basically control our immune system. It keeps our immune system in check, right? So, for instance, if TREGs counts are low, okay, that can lead to autoimmune disease or major allergies. If it's too high, that can actually contribute to cancer growth. So these TREGs have to be modulated. And even though a person may have the right amount of TREGs per se, some of them could be malfunctioning, right? So this is so T or TREGs are very important. In acupuncture, stomach 36, Zusali, stomach 36 is the 36th point on the stomach channel. In research, electrical acupuncture done at stomach 36 bilaterally shows to actually help modulate the T regulatory cells. Okay, this is proven. This is not guessing. This is not make-believe stuff. This has been shown in lab, in research, that stomach 36 can help regulate the T regulatory cells. So in turn, this can probably help ALS, okay, especially at the beginning stages, because if we can modulate these TREGs, it can tone down the inflammation around the motor neurons. It's a step. It's a step in the right direction. So again, Chris Johnson unfortunately has been diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and it's very, 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 very unfortunate. It really is. It really, really is. So please, if you have any comments, leave it below. And if you want me to do another video on this, let me know below also. Okay, my name is Fitz. I'm an acupuncture physician in Miami, Florida. And if you have any questions, please leave it below. Okay, if you're in Florida, I do house visits, or you can visit my clinic.